Sir, I had filed a specific parliamentary question on LTA's role on the rollout of the Marine Parade Cluster Bus Service to the Minister of Transport, but this was redirected to MCCY. So I have no choice but to put my SQs to MCCY. So over the last few years, there's been significant public unhappiness reported among Singaporeans across the island when bus rationalization exercises have been undertaken to remove bus services with the operationalization of new MRT lines. This was most recently manifested late last year when residents in Sembawang, Yishun, Ang Mo Kio, Bishan and Bukit Merah raised unhappiness about LTA's decision to amend services 75, 121, 162 and 859, and in addition to performing a U-turn on the decision to cancel bus service number 167. Commuter grouses over the bus service rationalization exercise centered on the loss of a direct bus route connecting northern Singapore to the city and the inconvenience of having to make multiple transfers.
Mr. Singh, I appreciate you want to give some context, but could you please ask your questions in light of question time being guillotined at 12:30?
Noted.
Thank you.
Noted, Deputy Speaker. In striking contrast, the Marine Parade Cluster Bus Service was announced about a week after new MRT stations were opened along the Thomson East Coast Line in Marine Parade, GRC. Does the Minister not agree that the Minister of State not agree that the introduction of the Marine Parade Cluster Bus Service will make it far more challenging for the government to undertake future bus service rationalization exercises, especially in view of the growing population of seniors in many mature estates in Singapore, who, like the residents in Marine Parade, would prefer easier and more inconvenient accessibility to polyclinics, hawker centres and MRT stations? My second SQ. In 2022, my colleague Gerald Giam had said in this House that LTA should strive to retain trunk bus services and as these serve many elderly and disabled residents, and suggested switching to smaller buses or extending bus intervals instead of removing services. On the launch of the Marine Parade Cluster Bus Service, Minister Edwin Tong was quoted as saying, even with a widespread transport system of public buses and MRTs, there is sometimes a gap. And that gap can translate into something that is quite difficult, especially if you're a senior, unquote. And on 30th of July, after the Parliament deadline for MPs to file PQs had passed, LTA announced a $900 million...
Mr. Singh, I appreciate you want to give context, but could you please get straight to the question?
I will come to the question,
sir.
LTA announced the $900 million bus connectivity enhancement program. My question, sir. In view of Singapore's growing population of seniors, where 1 in 4 Singaporeans will be 65 years of age and above by 2030, does the Marine Parade Cluster Bus Service open the door for LTA to introduce similar cluster services elsewhere in Singapore through the public transport system? And if not, what does the launch of the Marine Parade Cluster Bus Service say about the government's approach to equity and fairness in the use of taxpayer-funded grants to serve Singaporeans? Thank you. Thank you for your indulgence.
So I thank the Leader of the Opposition for his SQ. With regards to the broader connectivity questions, might I ask the member to file a separate PQ to LTA? But given that this, yes, but for a larger perspective on connectivity issues, but let's focus on the Marine Parade bus shuttle, because members have all filed related questions on the Marine Parade bus shuttle. And let me, as MCCY, explain why this bus, the context of this bus shuttle, and I'll leave in their separate, if there are separate questions with regards to LTA and MOT from a wider national perspective, to file those specific to MOT and LTA. So let me provide that context. First, this is a ground-up initiative. It's a ground-up initiative, very similar to other kinds of ground-up initiatives that the CDC supports. And let me just share with members that, for example, the CDC supports community markets. And that community markets, or a Ready for School kit, for example, they support through grants, but a proportion of that is also funded by, for example, grassroots organizations, donors. So this can be seen as also a ground-up initiative. At the same time, the purpose of this bus was meant to serve as an added convenience. Let me provide further context where there are other divisions who also set up similar kinds of bus service. And as I said in my original reply, it is it's difficult to sustain because of utilization rates as well as financial sustainability. So, for example, there are other kinds of bus services that have been trialed by other divisions. There's one, for example, where the local community had asked to provide a shuttle bus service to a local mosque, for example. That was a one-off project for the Ramadan period. That one was funded primarily by the local CCC, for example. Then there's another bus service that was run specifically to get seniors to get out of their homes so that they can be active, they can be connected to community. That one was donor supported, but discontinued because of low ridership. And then there's others where it was a bus service to help seniors to get vaccinated. And that is fully sponsored by sponsors. So these are the different kinds of bus services that are available or that have been set up by the local divisions. Now, for this particular pilot, as I mentioned in my reply, CDC will review this after 1 year and determine whether this works, and then we'll consider whether it is suitable for other divisions.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I just wanted to respond quickly to two of the points that Mr. Pritam Singh mentioned earlier in his questions. First, as MOS Alvin Tan mentioned, this shuttle bus at Marine Parade is a pilot community initiative. It is therefore separate from the public transport network. So when we responded earlier to Mr. Gerald Giam's suggestion to have shuttle buses be part of the public transport network, we explained that that would not fit well because you would still need to hire a driver and the capacity may not be enough to run as a public bus, part of our public transport network. Second clarification to what Mr. Singh mentioned earlier, we will continue to do rationalization and optimization of bus routes that run parallel to the MRT lines. I've mentioned this when we announced the Bus Connectivity Enhancement Program, because this is part of how we make better use of our limited resources. So the savings from the optimization of the bus routes, the long trunk routes, can then be used to support new bus services that are needed because we have new estates coming up in different parts of Singapore. But our assessment is that doing that alone would not be adequate because we have more demand than what we can rationalize, and therefore we are pumping in an additional up to $900 million over 8 years to be able to support more buses, hire more bus captains, so that we are able to meet the connectivity needs of our residents in both existing towns, but also in the newer estates. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I don't believe the MOS has answered my question regarding the average load factor of the bus service since it started. This is important in determining whether the service is being properly utilized. Secondly, why are the grassroots advisors, who are also PAP MPs, fronting this service, for example, having their caricatures painted on the side of the buses and an article published on the Petir.sg website, when public transport is something that should be provided by the government through LTA and its public transport operators to all residents of Singapore?
With regards to Mr. Gerald Giam's first question, it's still very early to assess it. It's only been running for about 3 weeks. So CDC, as I mentioned early on, will look at the ridership as well as the load and see whether that works. For your second question that has been answered to Mr. Leong Man Wai's written PQ yesterday, the short answer is that there are pictures of other Marine Parade landmarks, including Wisma Galang Serai, Old Airport Road. And these all help our residents, the residents who would like familiarity with these landmarks and people who are familiar to them, to identify the buses. I understand that, for example, Marine Parade and many other divisions have also, to help seniors to recognize their blocks, also put up images to help them to find their ways. So that's what it's being done, and I think that's also done to support many other seniors.